I'm Jackie Borman. I am 89 years old on August 15th, 2021, and I'm speaking with my grandson, Zachary Borman, in Boise, Idaho.
Okay. All right, so if you had to describe yourself to someone who'd never met you, what would you say?
I would say I'm now and always have been Miss Average, middle of the road on almost everything. Absolutely average.
Do you say that in kind of like a like a bad way, or is that?
No, I think it's just a normal. I'm just a normal person. I think I've always been. I wasn't, real smart. I wasn't real dumb. I was just average. I'm average in my thinking. I don't lean one way or the other real strongly. I get along with most people, and I've always considered myself very average. Middle of the road on almost everything.
Okay. My questions are out of order here. What can you tell me about your childhood? Where are you from?
I was born in Wichita, Kansas, and my parents got divorced when I was 4 years old. And I had a little sister who was 2 at the time. And we moved to Colorado at that time. So I don't remember, I remember very little before I was 4. And we did a lot of moving around, even in Colorado. I never went to the same school until I was in junior high and high school. And we still moved around different places. In Boulder, we lived in Boulder, Colorado.
With your mother? With
my mother. And she was remarried. And I had a stepdad who adopted me. And I had 3 other siblings after that. The youngest wasn't born until I was a senior in high school. We were pretty spread out. My sister Barb and I were 2 years apart. And my sister Phil and I were 5 years apart, almost 6. And my sister Carol was 10 years younger than me, and my little brother was 16 years younger than me. So we were really spread apart.
Yeah.
But a close family anyway.
So your biological father was just not in the picture at all?
He was not in the picture at all. I think he thought he was doing us a favor, and maybe he was, but back then, who knows. I think he really felt he was doing us a favor, but I felt like if I had anything to do with him, I was going to be disloyal to my mother.
Do you think she built that into you at all?
I don't think she ever did it on purpose. Maybe I was just thought that myself. I don't know. I don't think she never ever said anything bad about him or good. It was just like he wasn't alive. He wasn't there. As it turns out, my sister Barb had a relationship with him from she was probably 18 or 20 on, and he lived till he was in his 80s. And I think he came to Broomfield one time when we lived in the house I live in now. But I never told Bob and Joe, my 2 oldest sons, that my stepdad Fred was not my real dad. And I look back on it now, I think I was embarrassed, and I wasn't very nice to him. So I never heard from him again. So.
Had he reached out to you, or?
No, I don't remember him ever calling us or writing us or sending us gifts or anything else. From when I was 5 years old. And maybe he did, and I just didn't realize it. I don't know.
Yeah. Do you know what he did for a living?
He
or
worked
anything?
for Cudahy Meat Packing Company in Wichita, and I think he was kind of an accountant or something like that. And then later in life, he did have a business where it was a heating and cooling company or something like that. I've heard. I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
Don't have a recording of it.
What can you tell me about your mother and stepfather, the day-to-day
Day-to-day.
parents that you...
Well, he was a barber. He didn't make much money, but we thought we were rich. Us kids all thought we were rich, you know. Mm-hmm. So I think we had a real happy child life. We lived in Idaho Springs, which is a little mining town. When I was in first and second grade, up in the mountains, it was about 35 miles from Denver. On that time it was a dirt road, and now is I-70 going up to the mountains. And I remember, like somebody else I know, that I was late to school all the time. And I remember coming home from school one day when I was in first grade, I think it was, and my mom had a little baby in bed with her. I had no clue that we were going to have a baby, a little brother or sister, and there was my sister Phyllis, red-haired, very opinionated, very, I can remember her crying till she would turn purple, you know, she'd get so mad. She says, I don't have this red hair for nothing. But anyway, we lived there for 2 years. And in those 2 years, we lived in 2 different places in Idaho Springs. But I can remember my cousin, Rich, my Aunt Dorothy, which is my mom's sister. Evidently, they followed us from Wichita to Idaho Springs. And so he and I have always been like brothers and sisters. And we used to play on the mountains behind our houses, both places. And he's going to turn 90 next week, the 23rd actually. Oh my gosh. And so we've always remained close. And anyway, as far as Idaho Springs, I can remember being happy. I don't remember much. I remember going to school. I remember the janitor helped me. I found a report card. I was like tardy like 87 times or something in first grade in one period. So I must have been late every day.
What's that? I mean, probably not your fault in these cases due to...
I don't
like
know.
Fred
I think
or
we
your mom.
were, yeah. Maybe she was busy. I don't know. Maybe I just was dawdler. I don't know. I think I definitely was a dawdler. But I remember going into the cloakroom of the school. That school is still there in Idaho Springs, although I don't think it's used as a school. But I remember the janitor would see me walking down the street and wait until I got in. And he helped me get my leggings off, because we had to wear leggings.
What years are we talking here?
That was probably 1937, 38. And he would help me get my leggings off, and then I'd go into the classroom and he'd ring the tardy bell. So I had a lot of help. But then we moved back to Wichita, where I went to 3rd, 4th, and 5th grades there. I don't remember much about that, except I know one time we lived behind the barber shop in a 3-story house. And we had the 1st floor and the 3rd floor. And the 2nd floor we rented out to some other family. And that's about all I remember there. I do remember we moved to a different 3-story house, and I got into door-to-door salesmanship. And I was selling these little tiny sachet. It was called a sachet. It was about this big around, and it was wrapped up in satin or something. And it was to put in your drawer to make them smell good. And I went door to door trying to sell them for some reason. I think I was going to earn a pen, a fountain pen, if I sold them all. And I did not have very good luck. I was not good at it. And so when another salesman came to the door and my mom wouldn't buy anything, I burst out in tears because I wanted her to buy from that salesman, because I knew what it was like to try and sell something you couldn't sell. But after that, we moved back to Colorado again. We first went to Idaho Springs, and then this when I was in 6th grade. We moved to Boulder then. I think my dad had an opportunity at a barber shop there. I think he ended up buying a barber shop, which is down on the Pearl Street Mall. So we moved back to Boulder. So in 6th grade, I started 6th grade in Idaho Springs. Then we moved to Boulder, and I went to Washington School, which was on the north side of Boulder. And then we moved again, all this before Christmas time, to another house that we evidently bought on Bluff Street, and went to Whittier School. I have friends still that I knew when I was in 6th grade, which to you probably doesn't seem very long, but one of my best friends just died, and she was 89 already, but I'd known her since I went to that Whittier School. And another friend that I'm taking to the mountains on the 20th of September to Rocky Mountain National Park, I knew at Washington School in Boulder. So I've kept those friends since 6th grade. Mostly because we lived in the same town from then on. But anyway, we lived, I think I've got a thing in a book with 5 or 6 different places we lived in Boulder. We went around one day and took pictures, wrote down the addresses and the years that we lived in those houses. And they were scattered all around Boulder, from far north Boulder to far south Boulder, and then in between. So Barb was my best friend, mostly because we moved so much. And but it was nice going to school with the same people. I was very, very shy. And I think it was because I kept going to different schools and I have to make new friends all over again. I think my folks never thought anything about it. Maybe that's the way things were back then, I don't know. But my other friends from 6th grade on, they maybe went to school with the same people from kindergarten on. But actually, my mom took me to school because my cousin Rich was starting school. He was 6 months older, and I was supposed to go to the next year. So I started school when I was 4 years old. But anyway,
Tell me about your mother and what kind of a relationship you had with your mother growing up.
She was always busy. Everybody was always jealous of me because I had such a beautiful mother, and they still talk about that, how beautiful she was. She was only 18 when I was born, so she was by far the youngest mother of all my friends and everything. And she was pretty. She was very pretty. And very... She never taught us how to cook or sew or anything like that, although here I had 3 sisters and me, and she made all of our clothing. She was busy. she was a good cook. My dad was, my stepdad, I call him my dad, he was a really good cook too. In fact, he did a lot of cooking for us. But all in all, I'd say we were a very happy family. We loved to go to the mountains.
What was a regular meal when you were a little kid?
You know, it was during the war, and we didn't have meat all the time. I can remember having hamburger gravy, which I hated. Still don't like it. We would have, you know, like maybe a chicken or something on Sunday, but during the week we didn't eat that much. Nobody did, I don't think. Things were rationed. You know, sugar was rationed, shoes were rationed, gas was rationed. We didn't have a car for several years during the war. And luckily we lived where we could walk to school, to church, Dad walked to work. I don't know what Mom did other than take care of all of us. Back then, that's what mothers did. They just took care of the family. And I had a good relationship. I was the oldest. And we got along well. We didn't argue or fight or anything like that. We just knew we had to do what Mom said. And Dad. But I would say we had a real happy family, all in all. We didn't go to the mountains much at that time, you know, because in the war you didn't go anywhere. And that went on. We actually moved back to Colorado after the war had started. And so I think the war didn't get over till I was a sophomore in high school, something like that. So we were used to, you know, not having much of anything and going out for paper drives or even aluminum foil, which wasn't common then at all. We'd save the gum wrappers and roll them in a ball. That was a big thing.
What do you remember understanding about the war?
Very little about the war because, of course, we didn't have TV and the radio didn't have that much about it. The most you saw was if you went to a movies, which might cost 5 cents, there would be newsreels on, and that was about the only thing we knew about the war. We knew it was going on, but none of our family was in the war. My dad was too old. He was 7 years older than my mom. And I think, let's see, when I got married, I was 18 and she was 36. She was younger than you, Zach. when I got married. And she what was I saying? Oh, how old she was and everything and so he was 7 years older than her, so he was 43 when I got married. But when I had a very short childhood, didn't I?
You did. Sounds like it.
Because once you're married, you're grown up. And, you know, back then, you know, we didn't even live close to him because Jim was in the Air Force and we were in San Antonio by that time too. So I was 18, I think, still when we moved to San Antonio, Texas, and Jim was in the Air Force. But
before we move on to the gym phase, do you have any particular memories that stick out as the best and or the worst of your childhood? You know,
Gosh, I don't know about that. I remember we felt like we were, like I said, we felt like we were rich. I can remember taking the bus up to Chautauqua in Boulder and spending time at the park there, or going to a movie for 5 cents in the old place where they still have concerts there now every day in the summer. That was a real happy thing. I can remember sledding in the winter up at Chautauqua, up on the hill, and starting up at the top up by Chautauqua and going way down into Boulder because it was all downhill. That was really fun. You know, I was Miss Average. Everything, I don't like think about it. They wouldn't let me go on a hayrack ride with a football player, and that was maybe one of the saddest days of my life. But I wasn't, you know, overly happy or overly sad. I remember getting into trouble from walking home from the teen canteen all by myself when I was supposed to call them.
What is a teen canteen?
It was just a place for teenagers to hang out, and I think we danced and listened to music and stuff like that. But it wasn't a place that I went to a lot. I had very strict parents. They stricter than others. So they didn't want me going anywhere by myself or anything, so.
Because of boys?
I think they were more considered dangerous things around town. I don't know. I could tell you what I think. I think they thought they remembered what they did and didn't want me doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So.
Speaking of boys,
yeah.
So did you date anyone prior to Jim?
Yes. Yeah, I went out with, I can remember the first date I ever had was maybe when I was in junior high, and a boy from school wanted to go to the movies with me. And I was embarrassed to have him come to the house, so when I saw him coming walking down the street, I ran out to meet him and we went. But I had another boyfriend when I was a sophomore in high school that actually turned out to be one of Jim's best friends. And we dated for a couple of years. And he was the quarterback on the football team. And he took me to his prom and gave me this huge orchid, which my mother said, I've never had an orchid, and she was really unhappy that I got an orchid. It was a big thing back then. It was this big orchid. And I guess I really liked him, but then he was the first real boyfriend I ever had. And that went on for a couple of years. And then after that, I started going out with Jim.
Who was your first kiss? Did dating imply that, like?
I don't think that was my first kiss. It was another boy. But I don't, yeah, it was more a peck than a kiss.
Yeah. First ones usually are.
Yeah, and I don't think he was much taller than me. His name was Skippy Von Stroh.
Skip.
Skip Von Stroh. Trouble is, most of these people are dead now. But anyway, I think the year Jim graduated from high school in 1948, he invited me to go. The seniors always had a thing down at Elitch's in Lakeside, kind of a last party before graduation or around graduation time, and he invited me to go. I still have a little tintype about this big of the two of us that we took on our very first date, It's sitting on my dresser at home. And we went to both Elitch's and Lakeside. I've always liked all the rides, and he did too. And then there were big dance places at both of them, big ballrooms, and they had all these big bands that came to these places. Have you ever been to Lakeside?
Doesn't ring a bell. I've been to Elitch's, I think.
Well, Lakeside, they're both still there.
Okay.
They're both still there. Elitch's is not where it used to be, but it's downtown more now. But Lakeside is where it's always been. It's right on the side of a lake. And so was this big ballroom. But anyway, that was our very first date, was there.
Was he already signed up for the Air Force at that point?
No, he was not. He was going to start CU in the fall. And he went 2 years. Well, he went 1 year, and then I graduated. He was a year ahead of me in school. And then I went the next year. And then the Korean War came along, and he knew he was going to be drafted. So he actually joined the National Guard, which was in Boulder. And they got activated. It was the Air National Guard. And they got activated.
You were already married by this point.
Yes, we got married because we knew he was going to be leaving. That's the way people did then. And they were activated to Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio. And he left in March. We got married in November, so we'd been married 4 months before he left. And so after that, I went down there on the train after he was already down there several months. I think I waited till Barb graduated from high school, and then I went down. But, so we lived in San Antonio or Lackland for 2 years on the Air Force Base. And he was part of a radar group, which was defending our country from any planes flying in or things like that. So that's what he did for 2 years on there.
Did you, let's go back for just a second, but did you have, I mean, what were you planning on doing with your life after high school?
I had a lot of ideas of what I wanted to do. First of all, I wanted to join the Waves, which was women in the Navy. And since I wasn't a swimmer, which was kind of crazy, you know, I didn't do that. And another big dream I had was to be a air stewardess. I really did not want to go to college. I only went to college because my dad always said they moved to Boulder so I could go to CU. So I did that. And back then, I think most women, well, a lot of my friends did graduate from college, but and a lot of them got married right after high school too. Maybe it was 50-50. Maybe it was more got married right out of high school than went to college. But since we lived in a college town, it was most everybody just went to CU, Colorado University. So I don't remember ever dreaming of being a mom or whatever. Always did like to read. But
what did you read? Like fiction or nonfiction or just anything you could
about anything. You know, what I had to in school, which makes me think about Jim. After he had his stroke, he said he loved to read then. Before that, he had only read technical books. He had never read anything. I don't know how he got through college, but he did. But,
how did you and Jim meet? Do you remember? I mean, through school.
I think it was school. I remember the very first time I ever saw him. We were down in Denver at a basketball tournament, and you know, it's hot. There's a lot of kids yelling and screaming. And I happened to go out to get something to drink or something, And I don't know why I was at the bottom of these stairs, but I remember him coming down the stairs helping some other kid who had been drinking, and they got to the bottom and they got kicked out. And the look on his face made me cry because he was so sad about being kicked out because he's helping this kid down. And that's the first time I remember seeing him, actually. But I think it was through my other friend. His name was Dick Stoneman, and they were best friends. I don't know, other than that. He just invited me to go out with him.
And he was a year older than you?
He was a little over a year older, a year and a half older than me. But he was a year in school. He had started school, his birthday was September 1st. So he had started school. He was pretty young for his class too. But I was almost a year younger than almost everybody in my class.
Since you started at 4?
Mm-hmm, yeah. So.
When did it start to feel serious with Jim?
After I started, after we'd been going together for about a year, I started to see you, and I thought, oh, I think I want to see other people. And so we broke up, and I went out with a few people at CU. I found out I did not like them like I liked Jim. And so we got back together.
Was he dating other people during that time as well? Or was
I don't
he
think
just
he
sitting
was.
there, like, waiting for you to come back?
I don't think he was. At least if he did, I never knew about it. And it was probably only a matter of 2 or 3 months. Something like that. But anyway.
So when you got back together, it was with more purpose or
Yes,
intent?
yes. And I can remember, I'm sure it was after he was in the National Guard. We decided we wanted to get married and told my parents on Monday night that we wanted to get married the next Sunday. And for some reason, they were agreeable. Jim's brother was in the Army, and he was home on leave at that point. And that's the only family he had. His mom and his brother. He had had 2 other brothers. One brother died when he was 3 years old, and he was the oldest one. Jim never knew him. And then there was brother Bill, who was a year older than Jim. And then there was Jim, and then there was Bobby, who was like 2 or 3 years younger than Jim, but they were best friends. And he died when he was 12 years old. It was when the medicine sulfa was brand new, and the doctor had given it to him for something, I don't remember what. And it hardened his kidneys. They didn't tell him he had to drink a lot of water with it. And it just went and made like concrete in his kidneys, and it killed him. And so that was very sad. I never knew him. It was before. Jim was like 14 or 15. 14, I think he was, when that happened. It's just probably been in the last 10 years I found where he was buried in Boulder. So, anyway, that was all his family he had, was his mom and his brother at that point. He had a cousin, Raj, who had been raised with him like a brother too, but he lived in, I think he lived in Texas at that point. I know he did. Raj, who later we became pretty close with, but at that point it was just Bill and Beulah. And his mom was great. I probably was closer to her than I was my own mom after we were married. But she was happy to have a daughter. She had never had a daughter. So we got along really well. She died when she was 88, lived in Boulder. We were with her a lot. So.
Can you tell me a little bit about your and Jim's relationship? Like what did you love most about him? Or
What did I
how
love
you
most
guys-
about him? Everything. We got along really well, and I think a lot of it had to do with we almost grew up together, you know? I was not 16 and he was just 17 when we started knowing each other. We knew what each other liked. We liked doing things together. He liked doing what I liked to do, and I liked to do what he liked to do. So we just spent a lot of, we just enjoyed being together all the time. Not that we didn't each like to do other things too. We did, but we did like doing things together for 53 years. We look at other people and say, well, he's going this way and she's going that way. When do they do things together, you know?
What were some things that you would do, like mountains
We
and
like
stuff?
to play tennis together. We like to hike together. Mostly physical activities and stuff, although, you know, we liked working in the yard. We just liked working together as well as playing together. So that was good. But
when did Jim decide he was going to become an architect or an engineer?
I think when he was in high school, his drafting teacher said, "You're really good." He was really good at math, and he was really good at drawing things, designs and drafting and stuff like that. So I think that was just all it took to push him that way. He went in to CU. He didn't want to go to school. He didn't want to go to CU because he was terrible at English. He was really terrible at spelling. And his mom, who was a former teacher, she not only was an art teacher, but she was a teacher of, you know, grade school or something like that. She went over to the campus and went to the office and said, can he come to and not take any English? And they let him. So the first 2 years of his college, he did not take any English at all or any spelling, which is really funny because before he graduated at CU, he had to pass a spelling test. Which sounds really funny, but he worked hard at it and he did it. So anyway, he went to school for 2 years that way, and then he was in the Air Force for 2 years, and then came back and finished because of the GI Bill. And we lived on $160 a month. GI Bill. I didn't work. By that time we had Bob. And I babysat. I think I took care of other people's kids was all I did. I didn't do anything out of the home, I know. We lived in what was called Vetsville, and they were Quonset huts. Again, Jim's mom had arranged for him to enter CU when we came back, even though it was October and he had missed about a month and a half of school. She had gone to the campus and arranged for him to start late. And so we went back there and we lived in a Quonset hut, had 2 little bedrooms, and he finished school, got his architectural engineering degree. There was a lot of architecture in it at that time, and structural engineering too.
This is like mid-50s, are we talking now?
Uh-huh. We got married in 1950, and he'd already been to school from 48 to 50, And then he was in the Air Force for 2 years, and then went back to CU in 52 to 54. He graduated in May of 1954. I even got a degree. It was called a PhD, Putting Hubby Through. I had a big graduation up at Mackey Auditorium in Boulder. They probably don't do that anymore. But anyway, I have my PhD. You can laugh.
You say it fast enough, people will be like, oh, wow. Yeah, I have a PhD.
We were just typical, average. But I don't know, Jim was really easy to get along with, and we loved each other, and we loved doing things together. Not that we didn't ever have fights, we did. But
do you remember any particular fight? Like what is something that you would have fought about?
Mostly, probably, I think that was after he opened his own business. I don't remember fights before, really. After opened his own business, and he was gone night and day, and I had 4 little kids, and he chose to go play basketball with a bunch of other architects and things in the city of Denver, and then they go out and have beer afterwards. And here I am worrying about him. It was before cell phones. Where are you? That's probably the biggest fight I ever remember. But, nowadays you remember good things. You don't remember bad things.
Yeah.
At least I do.
Let's talk about parenting. Was Bob a planned thing? Were you guys ready? Or was
I
it
don't
just
think he was planned, no. It was just nature. We lived in San Antonio, and it was hot. No, I don't think. We just thought that was the natural run of things. We did not plan him. We didn't not plan him either. And neither of us knew, there were no books on parenting, no classes, no nothing to prepare you for anything. I see the gals nursing their babies now. Bob was born in an Air Force hospital, cost $11. And I can remember he took me in, and they stuck me in a little room by myself and sent him away. And 12 hours later, Bob was born. So it wasn't much fun. No preparation at all for it, either by what was going to happen or what you're going to do with the baby afterwards or anything.
And you weren't living around either your mother or your mother-in-law at that point, right?
No, we were in San Antonio. Although Mom did come down after he was born to help me, and I can remember thinking, I wish she hadn't come, because Jim thought he knew how to raise a baby, or, he thought anyway, they kind of clashed. And I was kind of stuck in the middle. But
how did you feel about baby once born? Was it like terrifying?
Yes, definitely terrifying. I can remember after she left, crying all day long because I couldn't nurse him, and he wouldn't take bottles. He just cried. It was scary. We had, if there was any training available, we didn't know about it. So.
Okay, hang on. StoryCorps only allows you to record 45 minutes.
Oh, hi.
So. all of this right now. Okay. All right, I think I'm done there. Okay,
You
where
know,
were we?
you asked about my relationship with Jim. I think we loved each other from the beginning. I know we did. But it just got better for 53 years. So even though the last 13, he was only 60 when he had that major stroke. We even became closer during those 13 years, mostly because he was at home with me, and we just learned, you know, we'd done all kinds of fun things together, motorcycling and things like that. And we couldn't do those things, but you just have to change what you enjoy doing together. Like tennis, he got so we could play we called it a cross-court game, just using cross courts rather than the whole court. Motorcycling, we sold our motorcycles. We went to jeeping. He got so he could drive again, but he never did drive in the mountains that much. We used that time, he taught me to be a better driver. I can remember before, if I was driving, he was always telling me what to do, and it made me mad. I did not want to be told how to drive, although he more or less taught me in the beginning anyway. But I thought to myself, he can't drive now, so the least I can do is let him tell me how to drive. And he did teach me to be a much better driver those 13 years, including in the mountains. So he would say, you know, this might be a good time to downshift or things like that. So
The only other person that I know that downshifts all the time, like very...
is Joe.
Is Joe.
I do that. But
Can you tell me a little bit about each of the kids as they came and kind of what their characters were? Or I mean, what you remember about them
I'll start
as
with
kids?
Bob. And you know how he is now. And he's always been like that. From when we first came home from the hospital. I think we stayed in the hospital 7 days back then. And we had a big crib. And he scooted. And at that point, people put their babies on their stomachs. He scooted from end to end in that crib from when he first came home from the hospital. He's always been a wanderer and a mover. Always has been. He was probably the hardest of all of our kids. But he's also, he lives with me now and we get along great. He left home when he probably never lived at home after he was 18 years old until, what was it? I don't know how many years he's been with me now, 5 or 6, since he is divorced and not having a permanent girlfriend at this point. But he's always been very smart, very smart. And as his 4th grade teacher said, a nonconformist.
In 4th grade.
Definitely. She said she talked to him then, talked to the school psychiatrist about him then, or psychologist or whatever. And she said, you know, because she didn't know when to make him conform and when not to. And that psychiatrist just said, well, just hope that his parents know when to make him conform and when not to. He's never been in any big trouble or anything like that, but I don't know if he's been the happiest of our children, but he does what he enjoys doing. And he's nice to have around, very nice to have around. And it's not just because I'm by myself, because I don't mind being by myself either. But, and then there's your dad. Joe, who was born when we lived in California. After Jim graduated from CU, we moved to Pasadena, California. Actually, we moved to Alhambra, and that was right next to Pasadena, and Jim went to work for this big engineering company called C.F. Braun. It was in Pasadena. I don't know how far we were, probably less than a mile from the city of Pasadena. So your dad was born in Huntington Beach. It wasn't Huntington Beach, it was Huntington something else hospital in Pasadena. And was darling when he came out with dark eyebrows and very sweet. Always ate everything immediately. I had experience of one other child, so he was a lot easier than.
Had you been hoping for a girl? I mean,
No, we didn't care.
Didn't care.
We didn't care. So.
Is that something like back at this time where the doctor's able to tell you what
Oh
the sex
no,
of the child
not at
was?
all.
You didn't know until they were
no,
born.
no clue. You had no clue what you were going to have. But they all came out weighing about 7.5 pounds, and I had no problem at all with any of them. And Bob, of course, being the first one, took the longest to get here, and each one got a little faster. But and my grandmother, Eustace, came to California where we were living when your dad was born to help me and to take care of Bob while I was in the hospital, which was not 7 days like it had been. It was 3 or 4 days probably. And Bob was 2 years and 3 or 4 months old when your dad came. And he was a happy baby and easy to have around. We lived in California for 2 years, so one of my funniest memories is my folks wanted to see him. They had not seen him. He was 3 months old. So my dad sent me an airplane ticket to fly from Los Angeles to Denver. And Bob was always on the move, and I'm flying to Denver with a 2-year-old and a baby, and we land in Denver. It was before they had the things that came out to get you went down the stairs and went across the field to go in. So I'm holding Joe. Bob takes off through the crowd. He's small enough he can wangle through everybody getting off. He's down the stairs and running across the airfield before I can get off the airplane. Look what you have to look forward to.
Foster's already kind of like that. I mean, he's a wanderer as well.
Yeah, well, that's the way Bob has been since he was born. So,
what kind of a kid was Joe?
Joe was really fun, nice to have around. He liked doing things. I don't think I could tell if he was artistic or not, but he was his big brother's guardian. He's always been a caretaker. Bob was in a fight at school or something, he would send Joe to fight. I got called to the principal's office so many times with Joe, and it was always for things like Joe's climbing a tree out in the yard of the school or something like that. But, and he was always very, like I say, he's a real caretaker now, and he always has been. His girlfriends were always people that needed help for some reason. I remember when he was a senior in high school, he was up for prom king, and there was this other girl who he's friends with, was up for prom queen, and she didn't have a date. So he invited her. Well, there's no way he was going to rent a tuxedo. And as for corsage, the lady that lived behind us had this huge flower garden. He went over there and picked flowers and made a corsage for her. And made it himself. And he wore a sport coat. But by the time he was crowned prom king and she was prom queen, he had his jacket off and his sleeves rolled up and everything. And when pictures were taken of him. Probably the only one that was comfortable there. Probably the only boy that was comfortable.
Did what he wanted?
Yes, did what he wanted, took care of everybody, and he was an easy child to have around and fun.
So then Christy came along how many years after Joe?
5. Well, between then I had 2 miscarriages. We moved back to Denver after we were there 2 years, and we knew the only way we were going to get back to Colorado was a company moved us there, because we didn't have the money otherwise. I think after Jim got out of school, he made $380 a month at CF Braun, and we thought we were rich. And we moved to California, and you're not rich at $380 a month. We had to rent a house, but we had to buy a stove, a refrigerator, and a washing machine. So he worked 2 jobs. He got up every morning about 3 or 4 in the morning, and he convinced this. Back then, gas stations did everything for you. They pumped the gas, they washed your windows, they checked your oil, everything. And he had never done it, but he convinced this big gas station guy that he knew how to do it. So he would work about 3 hours in the morning, come home and change his clothes, because at CF Braun you had to wear a suit, a necktie, and a white shirt. And he'd change his clothes and go to work at CF Braun. And he'd come home, change his clothes, go back to work. So, back then, big companies came around interviewing people, which reminds me of a job I had when I was in high school. I won't go on to that right now. But a big company called Stearns Rogers in Denver was a big engineering company. And they came and interviewed, and he got a job with them, and they moved us back to Denver. That's how we got back here.
What was your high school job?
I had several. First of all, I worked in the drugstore as a soda jerk when I was 13. And the drugstore was owned by a friend of ours.
Do you remember your starting pay?
35 cents an hour. That was the most I ever made then. 35 cents an hour. And I think I told you that story the other night. There was a older woman that worked as a soda jerk with me. Older, she was probably 16 or 17 or something like that. And Mr. Horton, the owner, had a habit of letting people come in. We were supposed to close at 9 o'clock at night, but he would leave the doors open and let people come in as long as they wanted to. And one night she just got really tired of it, took off her apron, threw it down on the desk, and walked out. So I took off my apron, I threw it down on the thing, and I walked out. By the time I got home, he had called my folks and said, "She's fired." The next summer he hired me back. And then after that, I worked at the movie theaters. Maybe that's where you get your love of movies. And I was a cashier, sat out in the little booth and sold. And I never wore makeup lipstick or anything. And I can remember we would have Saturday morning meetings and the owner would say, I wish you would wear some lipstick, which made me not want to wear lipstick. And then after that job, I had a job up at the University of Colorado in the basement of Mackey Auditorium in the Employment Bureau, where by that time, when I was in high school, I was a stenographer. I could do shorthand and stuff. And so I had a job at the Employment Bureau where big companies came to see you, interviewed the graduates for jobs after they got out of school. And then after that, I had a job at Esquire magazine, which headquarters was in Boulder, or it's where they sent it out from. I don't remember what I did. I think I did filing. Pretty sure I just did filing there. And then we got married and moved away.
Huh.
Had that job when we got married. When I was in the Air Force, I worked for the Red Cross as a stenographer, where airmen, and I think there weren't airwomen then, just airmen came in if they had problems, and the Red Cross would arrange for them to get home and things like that, or if they had any kind of a problem. So I was a stenographer there too.
Kept those records.
Mm-hmm. Till I had Bob. That was the end of that.
So let's go back to Christy.
Yes. Christy came, and we didn't know she was going to be a girl, of course. But we had a girl's name picked out. And Jim's mom came to take care of Bob and Joe. She was in California at the time, just taking care of Bill and Pat's kids for them. And she brought home with her their oldest one, Pam, who was 5 years old, I think. And I remember...
About Joe's age at that point?
Pardon?
About Joe's age then?
Yes. Yes. She's just a little bit older than Joe. You met her at Ryan's wedding. Did you go to Ryan and Becky's wedding?
I did,
She
yeah.
was there.
Okay.
She and her husband. No, she's never married. Patty's husband and her husband were there too. Anyway, I was always oh, that was Bill. She came to take care of Bill. Chrissy was just what my mother ordered. A little girl with black curly hair. And we were, of course, delighted to have a girl. And she's always been a delight for both of us. She got her black curly hair from Jim. And she started swimming when, well, we went to the swimming pool from when we moved to Broomfield when Joe was 3 and Bob was 5. We'd already started skiing with them because when we lived in California, we said, when we get back to Colorado, we're going to learn how to ski. So the whole time I was pregnant with her, I was skiing. Jim always said, when you can't fasten your boots, then you got to quit. I still skied on my birthday before she was born a couple of weeks later, but anyway, she was a joy to have, especially after 2 boys.
Was she just always agreeable in
Very
comparison
agreeable.
to the
Yes,
other 2?
always. Always. Night and day. But yes, she was a lot of fun to have as a little girl. Women always like it, but so do dads. But she, we were going to the swimming pool when she was born, and she'd go to the swimming pool with us, and she'd lay in a little bassinet, and the other high school girls would play with her and stuff. So she was in the water from early on. I've always said she learned how to butterfly when she was 3 years old and could go quite a ways.
How did she and the boys get along?
They took care of her. They really were, especially Joe, of course. They were especially close. And they loved having a little sister. At least they seemed to. They were always nice to her. But she was always smart. Always did well at school. Always competitive. Very competitive. Back in grade school, back then they gave what was called the President's Physical Fitness thing. And I remember she tried so hard to break whatever records there were that sometimes she'd get sick because she tried so hard. But she started dancing when she was, both she and Joe were both maybe very cramped before they were born in their stomach, and they both were born with feet that turned in like this, and they both had to wear what they called Dennis Brown splints. They were little high-top shoes. I'd put on them at night, and they had this steel bar between them, so it held their feet out in a position like this every night. That was just Joe and Chris that had that. And can't remember how. Joe was probably 2 when he quit wearing them, because the doctor said, well, boys have stronger legs if they're a little pigeon-toed. And then that's why Christy started taking dancing lessons when she was in 1st grade. And continued that till, I think she had a sprained ankle from playing soccer when she was in junior high. So she had dancing lessons.
What kind of dance?
Ballet. She just took ballet. Where Josie and Sammy and Allie all took from the same dance studio from when they were about the same age. But they went till, well, Allie went till she graduated, but she took not only ballet but tap, modern, about 6 different classes or 7 different classes. It was a big thing for Allie. Allie is built, but anyway, they've all been dancers because of Christy, I think. And Christy became a competitive swimmer when, well, Joe and Bob became competitive swimmers when they were 9 and 11. They would get on a bus by themselves, go downtown Denver, get off, and walk to the Central YMCA, which was quite a ways. But we didn't seem to think anything about it, And later I found out that they were probably not safe doing this. And then Jim's office was in Denver, and he would go by and pick them up when they were done and bring them home. But from then on, we spent a lot of time at swim meets and at swim practice and stuff. They were all really good swimmers. Bob was the least competitive. He wanted to do other things. And Joe was very good, very good. He had records. And Christy, I remember the first swim meet she was ever in was down at the Air Force Academy in this 50-meter pool. She was maybe 5 years old, 6 years old, and she was really upset because she didn't win, because Bob and Joe had always won. Competitive swimming was very big in Colorado back then. There were probably, I don't know how many teams. Around Denver there was probably 10 or 12 teams, big teams. Denver University had one, Celebrity Sports Center had one, You know, there was all kinds of them. So we spent a lot of our time at swim meets. So
Was Jim able to go to those as well, or
he went
mainly
to
you?
a lot of them, but he did go to most of them. The first couple of years of his business was where he was working night and day and night and day. Probably the first 3 or 4. And at that point they weren't, you know, he could go over to the YMCA. That's where a lot of the swim meets were. Later on they went all over to swim meets, but not like kids do nowadays where they go to states a long ways away. I think the furthest we went was New Mexico and Texas, Oklahoma. Never to Idaho. So your dad's about 12.
Do you know where that was taken?
No. Well, yeah, it's in our front yard. I can see the house across the street. I can tell from Christy's hair. She had not had her hair cut short since she was about 6 years old.
Well, I think Joe painted those for Christmas a number of years back. We were trying to get him to paint again. He's been real resistant to painting anymore, and I think he did that for one of the grandkids. It might have been Olivia Logan or something like that, and I don't think it went over the way that he wanted, and people didn't like it as much as. And then I don't think he's ever painted again. So.
Well, it's like the one he did of Jim up there. There was no way I could take it home. I wasn't driving or anything, and I don't know that I thought it really captured him, but maybe it did. You know, things change after you look at them years later and think, hey, that is pretty good, you know? I was trying to think when he first started being artistic, or when I thought he was artistic. And yet I have a painting hanging down in our tool facility. Jim always called things like, there was the furnace facility, the laundry facility, the tool facility. Hanging in the tool facility. And it's a picture that Joe painted when he was in high school that fit in a tool facility. But it is very good. So, I don't know when he started being artistic. He's just like been kind of that way all his life. Are you left-brained or right-brained when you're artistic? Left-brained, I think.
Left-brained, yeah. I think right-brained is math and stuff.
I think that's one reason Jim and I got along. We read this book about left brain and right brain, and it tested you to see what you were. We were right smack dab in the middle, both of us. Maybe that's why we got along well. I don't know. Well, it's just like any people you meet. Sometimes there's people you really don't like immediately, and ones you do like immediately.
Yeah, it's weird how you can kind of like sense it too.
Yeah,
you don't know
you just
exactly
right off you like
what
them
it
or you
is.
don't like them. You don't.
Can
So,
inherit
or you have a
kind of-
connection. Maybe that's more than liking or disliking.
Inherently kind of like understand their value set, you know, like what they deem important.
Yeah.
Okay, so we hit on all the kids except Bill.
Bill. Okay.
How many years after had you kind of like
Christy's-
considered? Did you think you were done after Christy, or?
Nope. Still, everything's very natural.
Yeah.
He was born 2 years and maybe, let's see, his birthday's in July and she's in April. 2 years and 3 months. after Christy was born. And of course, I really wanted another girl. My goal was 2 boys and 2 girls. And I even joked with neighbors that they would get, if it was a boy, they got to have him. Changed my mind. So, I don't know. Bill is more my caretaker than anybody, although Christy is too. And your dad is, even though he's far away. He calls me every night, so sometimes I talk to him a lot more than I do the ones that live 2 miles from me. But Bill, he's always been a joy too. And it's fun having boys around. I kind of got used to boys. And he was always very competitive also, and smart, loves to read and everything. Christy was valedictorian of her class, always. Was from when she graduated from college, summa cum laude.
She go to like...
She graduated from Temple.
Duke? Oh, Temple.
She went to CU for the first 2 years. Then she got married and moved to Philadelphia. And she finished up at Temple. And I can remember thinking when we went for her graduation, if we had seen where she had to go to school, we would have been nervous all the time. She told us when she first moved there that she couldn't wear any jewelry. She had to wear tennis shoes all the time so she'd be ready to run because of what it was like.
Urban Philadelphia or something?
Downtown Philadelphia.
Oh.
She had to take a subway way out to where she went to school, especially when she was going to physical therapy school. Anyway, she always did well, and Bill tried to follow her. Wanted to do as well as she did and everything. And at school, you know, they all 4 went to the same high school. They expected that of him because of Christy. Bob was very smart, but his teacher said he could have all A's if he wanted to, but he doesn't care.
I'm just lazy.
He doesn't. He wasn't dyslexic or anything like that. I mean, when he was in first grade, he read and he could tell you everything. He did everything so fast that we didn't think he'd done it. And we'd ask him questions about things. He knew what he'd read when he was in first grade. Now, Joe, he had to work hard for everything he did. He got all B's and stuff. He was much better student than Bob. But Bob's was just, he could get it in no time, and Joe had to work at it. And Christy came along, and she worked hard at it. Besides, she worked as a competitive swimmer, she worked in school, and she worked at the Dairy Queen, which by that time we had. So they were always all so busy that they never had any time to get into any kind of trouble at all. And Bill, he was a competitive swimmer too. It started when he was real little, like 3 or 4, and was a great swimmer. By that time we were, you know, it was nice to have all 4 kids in the same sport. We could go. Not that that was all they did. Like Joe played football in high school, wrestled. Christy, since Jim and I loved to play tennis a lot and played a lot, they didn't play a lot, but they were just natural at it, you know. So, sorry to get rambling here.
No, this is great.
Bill was always very popular. Joe was very popular with the girls. Always.
a handsome buck.
He was. He is. Still is. And, of course, Christy's swim coach always said she's going to be Miss America because she was so beautiful. But I can remember thinking when Bill was born that somebody was going to steal Christy while I was going to the hospital. But they didn't. She survived. But so did we.
So you got 4 great kids. Is it nurture or nature that they happen to all just be so
I think
awesome?
it's just nature. Although I always did feel that my job was to see that I had good kids.
Any parenting tips you could give the future generations? Because it's hard.
It is. It is hard. Gosh, I don't know. Spend time with them and love them. Be there for them. Don't be there too much. Give them freedom. I think your mom and dad have done great with you guys too. I don't know what does make you, all of them moved away and lived away in other places. Chicago, Philadelphia, Idaho. 3 of the 4 have come back. And I think if Leo didn't have a wonderful family here, probably you would be living in Colorado instead of Idaho. And we were maybe just spoiled as parents to have them come back. Remember when Bob and Tootie moved to Broomfield, we said, why in the world do you want to move to Broomfield, But they did. And it's a small town. Well, it's not so small anymore, but it is small compared to Boise. I think we have 65,000 people now. There were 2,000 when we moved there. So it's grown in the last 60 years, as everywhere has. But
did you guys build your house? Or?
We watched it being built. We bought it before it was built. And we lived in North Denver, and we'd drive out to Broomfield. And the reason we bought it was we could get it for $300 down. And it was only 10 miles from Denver, but it still was a long distance call at that time. And there was a Denver Boulder Turnpike that Grandpa had worked on when we were first married. He worked on that as a surveyor. And he would get on. It would cost 10 cents to go to Denver. It cost 15 cents to go to Boulder. But so he worked in Denver, and he had a carpool with another guy that lived in Broomfield and worked in his office. So it was a good place to live. But Bill was easy and a fun baby too. By that time, after you have 4, you realize what to do and what not to do, maybe. Maybe. I don't know. I just kind of have always done things by the seat of my pants anyway. Whatever. Maybe I learned from my mom. I don't know. But anyway.
What were you doing? So professionally at this point, were you, like, by the time you had Bill, were you working again, or were you still kind of
No,
just kind of
I
taking
was
care of
still at
kids?
home. I can remember when Bob was in high school, he always thought that the people he knew that had trouble with drugs, their mom was working. So to me it was important to be at home with them. I was a Cub Scout den mother for like 6 years, where I had about 8 little boys that, with both Bob and with Joe. And then Christy wasn't anything like Girl Scouts or anything like that. And then Bill, I said, no, you can't be a Cub Scout. You can't go in Scouts because I don't want to be a den mother again. But I did a lot of volunteer stuff. Like I was a pink lady at the hospital, and
what does that mean?
you just went around to the hospital rooms and asked if they wanted magazines or tea or something like that. You just went. They don't think they have them anymore. Pretty sure they don't. They have people that come around with dogs. So when Bill was little, we got our first dog, a basset hound. She was beautiful, but she ran away constantly. Basset hounds have the best nose other than a bloodhound. And if the front door opened, she was gone. And I was always having to go to the police to get her back. Each time, it would be double, $5, $10, $20, $40 to get her back.
Gosh.
And I talked him into letting us have her. We paid all of $250 for her, which was a lot of money.
Almost as much as your house down payment.
Oh, it was! Definitely was. But we got her, and I said we would have puppies in order to pay that back. Well, years later we had puppies, but we sold one, I don't know how much for, $50 or something like that. And it was to a policeman. Broomfield had 1 or 2 policemen at that time. Lived around the corner from us. He bought it while his wife was gone. She chewed up the furniture. They brought it back. Her name was Corey. We kept her. Another one we gave to the coach of the swim team. I don't think we got any money for that. And we did sell another one. She had 7 puppies, but 4 of them died at birth, even though we got her to the vet and we only had 3. Anyway, all that was when Bill was little. And so from then on, we always had a dog. But Bill was very competitive in swimming, just like the others. It was a family tradition by that time. And he was probably the best of all of them. But by the time he had graduated from high school, he was sick of it. He had started when he was, he'd probably done it for 14 years. And he was really good at it. And he was a sweetheart too. Always did well at school.
I remember him being real funny when he was younger.
He still has a real sense of humor, and what a memory he has. I mean, he would beat all of you guys in a trivia thing.
Yeah.
He knows every trivia thing there is to know, but he would love doing that with you. I know that. That's just what he
Playful,
is.
very playful.
Yes. Yes. And he and Bonnie have a very good relationship. They're a good pair. So, anyway.
Tell me a little bit about after the children were kind of like self-sufficient and stuff, what did you...
Actually, because of swimming, we bought a share in a Dairy Queen that was 2 blocks from our house. One of our good friends worked for a dairy in Denver, and he knew this Dairy Queen was for sale. And their kids and our kids were all good friends. You've heard of Rob, Joe's good friend, Rob? Well, they started out, they had a bicycle and a little cart that Rob's dad used to bring home things from the dairy, and they would ride over to the swimming pool and sell. It was before there was a concession stand there. They would sell ice cream bars to people at the swimming pool. Which takes me back to Joe finding a baby bird and bringing it home from a place called Ranger Forest, which was actually across the turnpike, and I had no idea that kids went clear over there. Back then, kids did what they wanted. They went around the neighborhood. I had whistled for them and they'd come home.
Like, just
No,
with your,
no, I just-
with your mouth, or do you have
With
like a
my
specialty
mouth. No,
whistle?
with the mouth.
Okay.
All our neighbors still remember that, but I cannot whistle anymore. It's like that. But it was loud. And he had this bird that he fed it dog food, and it sat out. We didn't have a cage or anything for it. It just sat out on the back patio, back tree. And he would put this bird on his shoulder and ride the bicycle over to the swimming pool, which is about a mile away. Put the bird up on the fence while they were selling stuff, and then he'd ride home back with it.
Could the bird fly? Or
They couldn't fly at that point.
Okay.
He taught it to fly. He would throw it up like this and try to get it to fly. Finally it flew away.
It's like a robin or something?
No, it was not. It was meadow, not a meadowlark. It was a bird that likes the country. I'll think of it, but I can't think of it right now. But anyway, what were we talking about?
Friends, Rob's parents.
Rob, oh,
shares
yeah,
their-
they became swimmers too. And so in order for the older kids to have a job, because of the competitive swim meets and things they were in, we bought this business so that they could go to swim
They could
meets.
have whatever
And they
schedule
could
they
work.
wanted, really.
Mhm. And that's why we bought it in 1969. We bought that. I guess after 69, that was when I had a job. But there were 3 families at first. One of them lived in Denver. We each put in $3,000 and we bought this franchise. Well, after 1 year, the family that lived in Denver decided they did not want to be any part of it. So Shirley and Bob gave a $1,500 and we gave them $1,500. They got their money back. That was 1970. And we always called it, Shirley was one of my best friends. She was my partner in the Dairy Queen. Shirley Reeves. That would be Rob's dad. And we called it our hobby. As far as training for knowing how to run a Dairy Queen, we had absolutely none. We went to another Dairy Queen for a couple of hours in Denver, and that was our training. That is what they do nowadays. But we did that, and we went in, and we fired everybody that worked there at that point, because we thought we could do it all. We found out we couldn't, we hired them back. So, let's see, 1969 I was 37 years old. About your age. And we kind of divided it up where I worked in the Dairy Queen and I took care of the books and the money and did the ordering and stuff like that. And Shirley ran the store, which is the way it continued for many years, but she just would put me in the schedule when she needed me, so I'd work maybe 3 or 4 days a week. But Bill was pretty young still then. Both Christy and Bill were still at home, and Joe was in high school. And he started working there then. In the second year, we decided that Joe and Rob could run the business. They did do a lot of help. But we didn't pay ourselves any money. And I don't know what we paid the kids, maybe dollar an hour or something like that. I don't remember what we paid them. Eventually we paid minimum wage, which was $3.50 or something an hour. Pretty soon we got so, let's see, what year did we expanded the Dairy Queen. It was just a little walk up, and we bought the property and built the building so there was inside seating and everything. I don't remember what year that was. Anyway, it became a business then, not a hobby. And Bob was sick with mononucleosis the first year we had it, and had a temperature of 105 for about a week. So by the time he was able to work, he felt behind everybody else, and he didn't like it. So Joe and Rob and Mark, who was Rob's little brother, they were our employees. And eventually everybody worked in the Dairy Queen, and even your mom worked in the Dairy Queen too. So Christy's husband Jim never worked in the Dairy Queen, but Bonnie worked in the Dairy Queen when they moved back. So for 27 years we had the Dairy Queen.
Employed the whole family.
Employed the whole family. And I worked up to $15 an hour. And Shirley died of cancer 8 years before we sold it, so I was the only one. I was the boss. I had to do everything. And 27 years, I hated it. I did not like it. I wanted to sell it from the very beginning. By that time, both Bob Reeves and Jim were convinced it was worth a lot of money. Of course, Jim had helped build it. Bob did things all the time to help with machines when they broke down. He mowed the lawn, things like that. So it was a family affair, really. And we bought it for that, well, we each had put in $4,500, and we sold it for $500,000. So it wasn't bad return on our money. In 1996 we sold it, and I was so happy, so happy. But they gave us $100,000 down, and that was the first time Jim and I ever had a savings account. We figured that we paid for 29 years of college or more, past college, and never had any savings at all. We didn't even have $100 in savings. So when we got that money, we started not just a savings account, we got an investment with it. And that was our first savings that we ever did. But we figured we were investing in our kids, because they all went to college, all graduated from college or past that, and didn't owe any money, which you can't do nowadays. You cannot do it. I mean, what one would take 1 year kid to go to college now was more than what 4 did going to college. So
yeah,
it's sad. It's really sad. But that was important.
Okay. If I can I ask about Grandpa's stroke?
Yes. He had his own structural engineering business. He was also a licensed architect. And he always liked hanging out with architects more than he did engineers, because engineers were dull. Architects, he was, like I said, right down the middle, but he was very good at math. He was better at structural engineering. But he had built up a business of 21 people. He had 2 partners, and then business. You know, everything in Denver went down the tubes. Nobody was building any buildings. At that point, he had done so many high-rise buildings and churches and schools and everything as a structural engineer, but there wasn't any business to be had, and so he was slowly having to get rid of people. And one of his partners decided, you know, we were keeping it. I had gotten a home equity loan on our house because I wanted to build a double-car garage. And he was using that money to keep the business going. So he was under a lot of stress. And he was also, that was when, can't think of the name of it now, computers just had come out, and he was trying to learn all the software for doing the drafting himself because he had to let all the people go. And he had one partner left. He was a younger guy, just a little older than your dad, who had come to work for him as a engineer some years before. And anyway, he was under so much stress, and one day I was driving in to work with him, and he drove right past the corner where he had to get off of the turnpike to go to his office, which I thought was kind of strange. And it turned out he could not see from here to here. He couldn't see anything to the right. The stroke had affected that nerve in his eyes. And we went on over to the office, and he had a very high blood pressure, like 200 something over something. And Bob came out, Bob and Bill both came out and looked at him. Their office was way down in South Denver, and he's in North Denver. They came out and they thought he was having a stroke. So I took him to the doctor, and they sent us right to the hospital. When they did the CT of him, the whole left side of his brain was full of blood, and that's why he could not see on his right side. So he was in a coma for about 5 days in the hospital, and didn't know any of us that was the 16th of December in year 2000. No, that was later. That was in 1990. He was 60 years old. And so he was in the hospital till I'd have to go back, because before that, in 1984, he woke up with a really terrible pain. He had never been to a doctor before. He had a terrible pain, and he had 5 aneurysms on his aorta, and they had replaced his aorta from here down through both legs. That was in 1984, so he was only 54 then. He was born in 1930. And then I started to say one of the happiest times in our life were the years we had the motorcycles, and we went everywhere on motorcycles. Well, he was working on a motorcycle, and he had aneurysms in his popliteal arteries right behind both legs, and ended up having to have arteries put in both legs, artificial arteries made of Gore-Tex. And so he had started out with that when he was 54, and then had the stroke in 1990, 6 years later. And so he didn't know any of us for 2 or 3 months. And it was really sad. He had another surgery because it clotted off one leg while he was still in the hospital with that, and had to have his leg artery, another artery put in there. And in rehab, they gave him a little paper. Part of it was putting a little balsa wood airplane together. It had 3 instructions. He couldn't read it. It was one of the saddest days of my life, and his, although he didn't realize, although he was really upset about that. But because he was a very determined person, he got it back. But I don't know how many months it took. He even went back to engineering, but I know his partner checked everything over he did and gave him really easy jobs to do for several years like that. And that's when we got back to playing cross-court tennis, was between 1990 and when he fell and pushed his femur through his pelvis at our back door. So he had a really rough last 13 years of his life, actually almost 17.
What had happened with his memory? He said that he couldn't, I mean, did it eventually come flooding back?
It came back. For a long time he was seeing double vision. He couldn't see to read or anything. And then he got, so that went away. But I'm trying to think. I took him to therapy for physical therapy, occupational therapy, and stuff for months after got out of the hospital. He was in the hospital for about a month and a half. And then his leg clotted off again. It was quite often happened. And he had many little strokes after that too. The first time, Bob lived there in town, and he would come rushing over, and we'd call the ambulance, and they'd take him to that hospital. And maybe it's a TIA, is called a transischemic attack, and it is that if it only lasts 24 hours or less. Other than that, it's a stroke. We lost count how many of those he had. Many. But he was always cheerful. He accepted things. He did what he could and did more. We went walking almost every day. It was a very slow walk, but we went walking, and he would count his steps. We'd go to the park and walk. And usually, if it was a place that was downhill, we'd walk down. I'd go back up and get the car and come pick him up. Things like that. We went for long walks out in this open space over towards the mountains. Miles. All because of his determination. So he never gave up. In fact, the day before he died, we thought we found what was going to keep him alive. We thought there was another reason, but he died that night. Actually, the next morning. But he never gave up, nor did I, thinking he wasn't going to get better. But he wasn't like a lot of people are grouchy when they're sick or can't do what they want to do. He was never like that. He was very loving and determined to get better. Although he would say, I've had a good life. If I die, I've had a good life.
What kind of a parent was he to the kids?
Strict. strict, but also loving and would do anything for him. It wasn't like he left me to do everything. He did it too, and he enjoyed them. So we were lucky.
Good man. What are you proudest of that you've accomplished in your life, or that you've done in your
My
life?
kids. For sure. And my grandkids. And now my great-grandkids. And I have 2 great-greats too, you know.
That's pretty crazy.
One time I counted how many, but I can't remember now what it was. My memory's not that great. Well, there's 15 of you guys. Bob's family only has 1 great and 2 great-greats. So I wish I could see more of them. I'm lucky though, because 3 of them live in Broomfield. But life goes on and I can't do what I used to be able to do. Maybe that's what I wish now. That I could do what I used to do. But that's part of getting old.
I totally even forgot to ask about your own health struggles and stuff. What's been the most challenging part of that for you? Or
Well,
what do
I've
you
been
think
pretty
that you've
lucky
kind of,
there
learned?
too, because I've always been well until I always gave blood every 8 weeks. And one time they wouldn't, well, I knew since before Jim had died that every once in a while I had blood in my stools. But I didn't have time for that. I didn't want to mess around with that. But one time I went to give blood and they wouldn't take it because I was anemic. And so I had to go to the doctor, and he wanted me to have a colonoscopy. So I did. Actually, I'd been the year before that and he wanted me to have one. I said, nah, I don't think so. If I had anything wrong, I wouldn't do anything anyway. And so the second year, I did go and have the colonoscopy and the endoscopy. Endoscopy, they go down through your throat because they weren't sure where this blood was coming from. So they found that, then the doctor came in. Bonnie had taken me over to have it done, and because you gotta have somebody go with you, they have to drive you home. And the doctor says, you have cancer. And I said, how do you know? You haven't biopsied it yet. He says, I've done 10,000 of these, more than 10,000, I can tell. And so then we began the investigation, going to, had other tests and everything. And they said the cancer was too close to my rectum to just take it out, the colon out. If you have colon cancer, they can usually just take out an area of the colon and hook it back up. Well, mine was too close to the rectum for them to do that. They would have to take my rectum out. and I have to have a colonoscopy, a colostomy. So I thought that would be horrible, and even had dreams that I did not have to have it. They said I'd have to have chemo every day for 6 weeks, at the same time radiation on that place every day for 6 weeks. By about the 4th or 5th week, I was so sick I could hardly hold my head up. So they let me have a week off and then went back to finish it. And it had shrunk the cancer by enough that they could take the rest of it out. And at that point they said they'd have to take it out, and that's when I was dreaming that it was gonna all be gone by that time, but it wasn't. So I had 4 weeks off, and then I had surgery for them to take the rest of the cancer out. I ended up being in the hospital 22 days because once you've done that, you're apt to have a problem with hernias where you're sitting. In fact, one time I was supposed to come up here to see you guys, and I couldn't come because I couldn't sit down. Couldn't get on the airplane. So I think I had, after the main surgery and I got the colostomy, I had 3 more surgeries for hernias. You can't sit down. I made the big mistake of going to one of Joey's concerts and sat on a bleachers, high school bleachers, and it was too hard. This is the first time I've come up here that I didn't have to bring a cushion with me. So it's now been 7 years this September. Yeah, 7 years this September. I had to have another PET scan to see. They said I had some spots in my liver and in my lungs, and they weren't sure if it was cancer or not, but actually the cancer had spread to some of the lymph nodes around there. It had gone through the thing there, and so they had taken those out too, which made it stage 4 cancer because it had spread, but not spread all through my body. So they were able, I was very lucky. They were able to take it all out. And so, as I say, it's been 7 years ago. And, you know, the chemo, which I said I wouldn't do.
What changed your mind on that?
Well, I asked the doctor what it would happen if I didn't. And my rectum would just completely close up, and I thought that sounded like a miserable death. So I said, okay, I'll do it. And I figured, I've been well all my life. I won't have any of those side effects they talk about. I didn't for a couple of weeks. And what saved me was all the good extra help I had. Like Christy was there all the time for me. Bill was there. Bob was there. Your folks came down. One time when they came down, I had to go to emergency hospital and have, even though the chemo I had was not through an IV, it was a pill. And I never lost my hair. They said I might and I might not. I never lost my hair. But that was probably the only side effect that I didn't have. I would get very dehydrated, even though I drank a lot of water and everything, and I'd have to go and have an infusion of this, whatever they told me it was. It would take about 3 hours, and so I would have to go over to the hospital and have those for I don't know how many weeks. And sometimes a nurse came to my house on the weekend because they weren't open on the weekend. So the nurse would come to the hospital, to my house, and give me infusions there too. So I had a bad, let's see, 6 months. And after that, other than not having, be what I can't eat and what I can eat, and where I can sit and how long I can sit, everything's fine. You don't look sad.
That's just, so few people, I think, can say they lived through something like that. I'm just very lucky to have you.
Blessed, very blessed.
Speaking of blessed, I guess, can you tell me a little bit about like
my belief?
Your beliefs. Just
yes.
Tell me what.
I believe in Jesus. I believe in God, and I feel like I have another family at church. My church is very small. There's about 150 people in it. But I remember we used to go to church when the kids were little. During swimming and the Dairy Queen, I kind of quit going to church for many years. And because I was always busy on Sunday. And then Grandma Helen moved from Berthoud down to Broomfield because I talked her into it. Didn't want her being by herself up there. And she had always gone to church, and she'd always gone to this Presbyterian church up there. So I started taking her to church. And she lived in Broomfield 5 years before she died. And I think by that time I was really into that church, and our pastor would come and visit Jim when he was sick, and but even though Jim had never ever gone to that church, he would come and visit. And do you remember his service at all?
Yeah.
Well, that was the church where I go now. And I have wonderful friends there. Last Wednesday I went down to Evergreen to a lunch with 3 of them. And anyway, after Jim died, our pastor said to me, now you've got to figure out what you're going to do with all your time. And that didn't, faze me yet. I didn't know what I wanted to do with all my time. I was by myself. But I'd been more or less by myself for 13 years because Jim was not able to do things like, taking care of the yard, shoveling snow and things like that. I'd been doing those for a long time. So I kind of had a break-in time he was there. I can remember back when he was working all the time and I had 4 little kids, I would get afraid of somebody breaking in or something like that. After Jim died, I wasn't afraid at all. I didn't care whether I lived or not.
Had you ever considered, even played with the idea of potentially getting married again or anything after that?
Never have. I never wanted to. I have a close friend across the street whose wife died, who lived there for 50 years. Kenny, I call him, who we do a lot of things together, but I wouldn't want to get married to him. But it is nice having somebody that close. Well, before I used to have all these friends around there, and they've died. Except for him. He and I are the only ones left that were in the neighborhood 50 years ago. So, but no, I never felt like I needed to or wanted to. I think that comes from being married a long time. But I don't know. I never looked for one. Or felt like I needed one. And then maybe if I didn't have a great family, I would have wanted to. I don't know.
The number of friendships that you have and the length of time that they've lasted is pretty incredible. I mean, I feel like even hanging on to like one or two friendships for me from high school is difficult. You know,
Right.
do you have any, what do you do
Oh,
that I mean, you
gosh.
just are so good at maintaining friendships?
There were probably 10 of us that get together. Two of my closest friend, Jeanette, just died last September, all of a sudden. And we did a lot together. I talked to her on the phone every day. Well, my sisters are kind of like that too. Although both Barb cannot hear and she cannot see. I read to her every day. I talk to her on the phone. She can't drive anymore. For 11 years, she did home hemodialysis on her husband, Don, where they had to come over to the CU hospital once a month or it wouldn't be paid for. So they would come over every month and stay 3 days. They'd drive over one day, stay all night, go to the hospital the next day, come home, takes all day, stay all night, and then leave the next day to go home because he could miss 1 day of dialysis. So, anyway, they were going home from my house 3 years ago, August the 11th, and had an accident and he was killed. He was almost to die anyway. But still, she was driving, so she felt terrible about it. Even though she'd kept him alive for 11 years, he would have been dead. But anyway, her vision has gotten so bad that she couldn't get a driver's license anymore. And she's legally blind and legally deaf. I mean, even with hearing aids, she can't hear. I don't know why she can hear my voice. I think I have a sharp voice. She can't hear most people on the telephone, but she can hear me. So I read to her every day. She does listen to some, and I don't know how loud it is or what. She has some books that she gets that. And my sister Phil, who is 5.5 years younger than me, has a dementia that is so bad that her daughter more or less takes care of her, but she lives by herself in an apartment. She lives in the same apartment building with her, and when she falls down, she goes over and picks her up. She helps fix food for her. And when I go up to pick her up, I drive into their garage. Monica brings her down in a wheelchair, helps her get in my car, and we go someplace and go driving around. Yeah. Usually we get something to eat without going in anywhere. We'll get something like at Cane's, chicken, and go to the park and sit and watch the lake or ducks or whatever and drive around. She remembers things as we're driving around and stuff.
Do you have a favorite food or anything at this point?
Pizza.
Can't go wrong.
Yeah, no, probably my favorite food is pizza. So, depends on what's on it, you know. But, you know, Bob is with me at least 4 nights a week usually, maybe sometimes all of them. But no matter what I feed him, he thinks it's good. He thinks it's good. Well, that's the way Jim was too.
Grateful.
Yes, very grateful to have it. So, and I can't eat too late at night, so I don't eat with him very often. So I do sometimes, but mostly by myself.
Well, if I can just ask one more question here.
Sure.
I don't know if we're pretty close to the end of the tape.
Can I
here,
say
but-
something about friends?
Sure. Yeah, please.
They are really important. I consider my sisters and my brother, who moved to Tennessee, friends, as well as my family. But I do have a lot of friends. And they make life better.
Sounds like they've got you through a lot of hard times, and you've helped them through a lot of hard times as well.
That is what I guess I found to do after Jim died, was to help other people. And I was a deacon at my church. I wasn't even a member of that church, and they asked me to become a deacon. And I said, well, I'll have to join the church first. So I did, and I've been a deacon for 12 years. Well, a deacon doesn't do much. They go visit people when they're sick. You have a certain group of people that you're supposed to watch over. There's about 12 or 14 people, depending. And through those years, you're not supposed to be a deacon that long, but I was. Just because I did not want to let them go, all those people. And of course they became friends too. And then it was a way for me to get acquainted with all the other people in the church too. But you help at funerals, you take care of funerals, and we hardly ever have a wedding at church. But mostly it's just helping people. So
Death is not something that people like to talk about or are comfortable with for the most part, but it sounds like, you've dealt with it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
What is your relationship with it now, or how do you work with people?
It doesn't
that are
bother
dealing
me at
with it?
all. I look forward to it. I don't look forward to it as much as I did when Jim first died. But I believe there's a heaven, and I'll see him.
So if future generations are watching this and stuff like that, and you could pass on something that you've learned, something that you wish you knew earlier in life, or something like that, what would you say?
Faith in God. Faith in yourself. And faith in your family. But I've been so blessed and so lucky to have that. That I don't want to die. I'm not saying I want to die now, but when, sometimes I gotta admit I think it might be better, because I keep thinking I can do things, and I think almost all old people do this. Think they can do what they used to do, and you can't. And it's kind of depressing. But what comes after doesn't scare me at all. And thank you, Zach.
Is there anything else that I didn't get to ask you, or anything that you wanted to say, or just...
Right now I can't think of anything. But if you have somebody to go through life with that you love and cherish, it's probably the most important thing.
Well, thank you. A couple years in the making here, but we got it done.
Good.